We're made in America, so we're the only charging company that's made in America.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today is January 25th, 2022. I'm Eric Planey.
I am Lucas Finko.
And special guest today is
Paul Vosper. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're listening.
Exactly. Well, with that, the three of us today are the Pirates of Clean Tech. Yar.
Yarr.
Yar.
All
Oh,
right.
that's pretty good.
That was good. Yeah.
Most of our guests are a little bit reluctant, but by the end of the episode, we get a really good yar out of them. So,
Well, my family comes from Cornwall in England, which is very well known for its pirates. So,
oh well, then it's in the DNA then.
yeah, apparently.
We had the former CEO of Aston Martin on last year, and he thought our yar was too American, and I don't know what he did, but it didn't sound like anything related to a pirate to me. Well, first off, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We hope everyone is staying safe and staying warm. It's been frigid here in the Northeast. But we have a great episode today, and it's our first guest in probably 3 or 4 episodes. We've had a lot of people asking us and talking to us about electric vehicles, and particularly their reluctance to purchase an electric vehicle because of charging infrastructure in the United States. And so we wanted to get into it from what's happening in charging infrastructure, what's happening in this country, what growth projections are there, and how people can get comfortable purchasing an electric vehicle if they so choose, having comfort with EV charging. And so Paul is the CEO of a great company called JuiceBar, which has been really in high growth mode for, I think, several years now. I think you kind of merged into it in 2018. So Paul, why don't you give us a little bit of your background and tell us how you came into your position at JuiceBar, and then we can go into some questions about the industry.
Sure. Well, it all started, as you said, in 2018. I spent a career in real estate and commercial real estate. So when my business partner, Jeff Mayer, asked me to help him do the due diligence and see if we'd be interested in buying the company, my first reaction is I can barely change the battery in a children's toy. Why me? And he very presciently said, because you know about real estate, and every single one of these chargers needs to go in a parking lot, and parking lot's real estate. So that's kind of how I got started in it. But it's been a fascinating journey. I mean, it's we've torn up our business plan pretty much every quarter. We've vastly under projected the EV adoption rates, but you're right. It's we are moving into a world that is going to be very different, and it's moving very, very quickly.
So thank you for that, and I agree. The growth rate. I think I saw a statistic this morning that last year was at almost 3% of vehicles purchased in the U.S. were electric vehicles, which is a really significant number versus where it has been. So. Yeah. Let me start with the confusion that people have about EV charging, and it seems to be 2 things for me. One is the different types of chargers used in vehicles, and the perception that if I buy an electric vehicle, I may not be able to go to the grocery store and use that particular charger. That's number one. And then secondly, there doesn't seem to be in the United States, and maybe even globally, a cohesive strategy to put vehicle chargers where they need to be. And nobody seems to really know where they need to go, or at least it hasn't been clearly disseminated to the public yet. And that's why there's a little bit of skepticism. So maybe with your real estate background, talk a little bit also about, how do we get this country to really embrace and adopt EV charging infrastructure so people can be all in on purchasing the vehicle?
Yeah. Well, I think you've got to look at it first in terms of what gets the most charges in the most locations. So there's going to be some challenging locations. There are going to be things that are harder to do than easier to do. But if you look at it from let's get as many charges into the ground as possible, as quickly as possible. You've got to, first of all, I think, divorce your mentality from the gas station. So if you're an EV driver, it's much more like your cell phone. You're either charging at night while you're sleeping, or you're charging during the day while you're in the office, or at the hotel, or at the hospital, or any location where you're going to be 3-4 hours. And the vast majority of your driving falls into that category. Most people, the average driver drives 30 miles a day. Vehicles. I have a 2-year-old EV that does 240 miles of range. So I'm not even charging every day. I'm charging 3 or 4 times a week, unless I'm going on long distance. So that's the backbone, right? The backbone is to get chargers in office buildings, hotels, apartment complexes, multifamily. If you're lucky enough to have a garage and enough power in your house, you can put a charger in your garage. That's like having a gas station in your garage. And that was really great when COVID first hit, because I wasn't having to go to a gas station when we were all worried about touching stuff. But that's really, really think about, rather than going somewhere specific to charge, the charging environment is you charge while you're doing something else. And it's typically, working or sleeping when it comes down to the vast majority of it. And so that also means that the vast majority of charging can be accommodated with level 2 chargers. Level 2 chargers are nothing more than a high-powered connection to the commercial charging speed. So in your home, most of your plugs are 110 volts. You've got 220 or 240 going into your dryer. So my charger is connected to my dryer circuit, so I can charge at 220 volts. That's what's in the office, mostly 208 to 240. That's plenty to accommodate. I mean, you can recharge your vehicle from 0 within 3 to 6 hours, depending on the speed of the charger. So if I show up for work at 8 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning, well before 5 o'clock, I've got a full charge. If I go to bed at night with 20% left in my battery, by 6 o'clock in the morning, I've got a fully charged vehicle. And that deals with 95% of your driving needs. You need the fast chargers. So typically those are the ones you see on the highway, the superchargers, the Tesla makes, or the Electrify America or EVgo. But that's only about 5% of the miles driven. So you don't, we need those chargers because nobody buys a car, or very few, at least my age, we don't buy cars for different trips. We buy one car typically for our longest trip. So people need to be comfortable that they can drive to Boston to see grandma at Thanksgiving, and charge up if they need to along the way. But that's a very small fraction of what you actually do. So my experience as an EV driver has been, I use a fast charger maybe 3 or 4 times a year. Vast majority of what I do is charging at home or charging at the office.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I own an EV. And again, yes, I use a fast charger maybe a handful of times a year. When I go on a trip up to the lake or what have you, right? I use the ones on the thruway. So, the vast majority of the time, the vehicle is in the top quarter state of charge, and it charges every night. And we do that to try and keep the battery maintained, and we even just use a trickle charger off of the wall outlet. So so for that application, that's why I've been a big advocate that any 2 vehicle household should have one EV, right? At least just as getting around town, going to work, these things are perfect for EV use. Everything except traveling cross country, right? So
Well, let me go back to a statement you made, because a couple of things really hit me. One is, I love your analogy comparing it to how you use your cell phone, because I don't think people think of that. And that was kind of a light bulb that went off in my head when you said it. I think we all kind of had that reaction. The second part too is the idea of decoupling ourselves mentally from the idea of the gas station, and to charge while you're either at work or in the office. If the American psyche got away from this fear and phobia of range anxiety, and also didn't think about the gas station, because I think a lot of people say, what am I going to do for 25 minutes when I go to the gas station and the charge takes that long? If we pull back from that, do you think our stakeholders in EV charging, our politicians, our regulators, and our corporate CEOs in charging companies, would we be smarter about where charging stations are going right now? Or are we already on that trend of putting them in the right place at the right time, but maybe the word isn't out just quite yet?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of people are grappling with this because it's brand new technology, and so but it's really not that complicated. I mean, it's complex. We like any industry, we complicate things with buzzwords and so on. But when it comes down to it, it's where's the dwell time? Where a car is sitting for 3 or 4 hours. And so, it's not, we talked to a lot of politicians, we talked to a lot of policymakers, and they get it. It's not, we don't have to, we're not explaining physics or a black box hedge fund or something. So it's pretty straightforward. I think there is, we're talking to one state, for example, that has some allocation from the federal infrastructure bill, and they were asking us our view. And I said, well, you've got a lot of municipal parking lots that most of the downtown area is owned, the parking lots are owned by the municipality. Put them there because they're visible. And so if you look at, what London did, my hometown, it sprinkled EV chargers around the city, but in public visible street locations, so that as people are driving around, they can see visibly the chargers. And once you start seeing chargers, your range anxiety goes away. Once you own an EV, you find that you don't really have range anxiety. And it's going to get less because the vehicles are coming now with longer and longer range. So, my car is 2 years old. It's at, 240 miles of range. That was good 2 years ago. Today, I think probably 300 to 350 is kind of good. We'll be at 400 and 450 by the end of the year. And we're already seeing at the luxury end of the market, the Mercedes and Lucid Air at 500 to 600 miles of range. That will start spreading down to more affordable vehicles. So it's not out of the realm of possibility within 2 or 3 years we see 700 miles of range, which means, you think about 700 miles of range, that's about the maximum you could drive in a day anyway. You'd have to be pretty brutal. It's a pretty brutal day if you're driving 700 miles, but that's enough for me to drive to see my son in DC and get back home here in Connecticut and have range left over. So I'm not even going to pull in, that 20 minutes, I'm not even going to bother to pull in and charge. I might connect it to a charger where I'm going to get something to eat or, go to the bathroom, but I'm not doing it because I need to. I'm doing it just because I might as well top off while I'm doing something else. But, that's really where, once we get to 700 miles of range, there is no range anxiety. And we're seeing, and the private market is responding. I mean, hotels, if you don't have a charger in your hotel right now, you're losing business. Because when I'm driving, when I drive to DC, I have to stop. I have to stay at a hotel that has a charger because I need that overnight charge to get, to get up and running again. So, so if you're, and that, the demographics of EV drivers are, typically millennials in families, higher educated and more affluent. So for most of the hotel chains, that's their sweet spot of customer. So, while we only may be at 3% across the nation, when you start digging into the millennials, not only are they more, they've adopted EVs more quickly, but they're saying to the pollsters their next car will be an EV. And so we're going to see that growth very quickly in that high purchasing, high valued market.
Paul, could you talk about JuiceBar a little bit and where JuiceBar came from and how that experience has gone?
Yeah, sure. So the origins of JuiceBar were we were originally owned by ProPark, and I think that's very important from the way in which we set up and continue to manage the company. So ProPark manages parking lots on behalf of customers. They own parking lots of their own. So to them, what was very, very important is reliability. The charger has to be a good quality charger, has to be reliable, has to work. Because otherwise their customer, whether that's the driver or the building owner, it damages their brand. And so we've maintained that philosophy, and I'll say that in general, one of the areas where there is range anxiety is really in the quality of the chargers. The chargers are not as reliable as they should be across the industry, and there's nothing worse than going on PlugShare, seeing a charger that's right where you need it to be, getting there, and the damn thing doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I would say that it's gotten better, but on the highway side, and I'm somebody who knows how to operate a charger. I know the tricks, and I probably have about 20% of the time I have a problem. So if I'm having a problem 20% of the time, God knows what I'll do some things you're not supposed to do with a charger because I know what I'm doing, but to try and get it to work. So we've got to get for mass adoption. We've got to have the same reliability as a gas pump. And if you pulled into a gas station and it didn't work, you'd be shocked. So while I don't like to talk about the gas station as an analogy, I do think about the gas stations from a reliability point of view. So we've done a ton of work to make sure our chargers are reliable, that they work, and that they operate. As I said, we operate anywhere from an Arizona summer to a Northern Canadian winter. That's a huge spread, and that's really the most important thing. We've developed some heightened safety requirements. We've got our chargers operate faster than the average charger does. We're made in America, so we're the only charging company that's made in America that meets the content requirements to be able to certify that. We're very proud of that. We're very proud of the fact that we also not only are we made in America for our commercial charger, but also the residential charger that we're going to be launching this summer is also made in America. So we've proven that you can build a better mousetrap with better quality, and you can do it in America at a cheaper price. So we're cheaper than the stuff that's made in China or Mexico or the Philippines, even on the residential charger side, which is obviously a lower margin business for us. But that I'm very proud of. I'm very proud of our team for being able to pull that off. And it's been a godsend for us during the supply chain crisis. But ultimately, what you asked a question about, one of the things we've talked about in the past is about jobs in the green energy. We're bringing jobs into green energy. And that was very important for my partner and I, that we're hiring in the advanced manufacturing side, in the engineering side, in the software engineering side. These are all high-skilled jobs, and even on the manufacturing side, you're getting paid a salary, not an hourly wage. You're getting health benefits and a 401k plan. For many of our employees, that's the first time they've had a healthcare plan. Wow. It changes people's lives, and it takes a huge stress out of your life. For most people, not having health insurance is an underlying stress condition, right? You God forbid that something goes wrong and you need healthcare. So in this country, at least, it's I feel very proud of the fact that we've been able to pull people out of one paycheck from a crisis type situations.
No, that's great. Going back a little bit to, and we're big believers in workforce development, so this is music to our ears. I want to go back 1 second about your product. Talk about, are you selling mainly level 2 chargers that are used in public or parking garages? Do you have a DC fast charger? And then do you have any relationships with, say, the battery side of things? Because I know a lot of people are looking at DC fast chargers and say grouping of them 4 or 5, they need to have a battery to go with it because of the intense, electrical output at one point. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we don't manufacture level 3s, DC fast. We only manufacture level 2s. We do work with most of the big level 3 manufacturers, so ABB, FSEC, Tritium. But generally, that's where somebody wants a DC fast charger as part of a broader installation. We have we have a pharmaceutical biotech company. They like to have mostly level 2s, but they like to have at least one level 3 on site for emergency basis. So we're not competing on the highway with people like Electrify America or Tesla or EVgo. We think that's a competitive market, and it's not where we can really add value.
Mhm.
So we focus on the level 2 side, not that not that the level 3 there's anything wrong with it. It's just we've chosen to focus on that level 2 side.
Oh, no, agreed. Talk about, and then maybe this dovetails in the next question, but when you pull into a public parking garage today or a hotel parking lot,
Mm-hmm.
you normally see 2 or 3 chargers and for the whole
Mhm.
parking lot, which is great. It satisfies some demand. But 5-7 years from now, we may be at the situation where, probably not quite yet, but 60-70% of the vehicles on the road driven by consumers are electric or some sort of plug-in hybrid. But what happens is the parking lot owner, the parking garage owner, will they have a sense of obligation, or from just good marketing, good business, to have 3/4 of their parking spots have a charger associated with them? Is that where we're heading to, you think?
Yeah. I mean, and don't forget the EV adoption rate is not spread evenly across the country. So if you're in Boston 7 years from now, 50 to 75% of your parking lot is going to be electric. In California, it's going to be 75 plus. Washington, D.C., it's going to be 70% plus. Florida, Texas. It's not happening evenly, but in these hot, markets, you're going to, I don't think you're going to have to wait 7 years for that either. I think it's more like 5 years. It's coming fast. Because, ultimately the sort of light bulb moment for me was when a friend of mine bought an electric car before I did. I got in it. I said, this is just better technology. It's fast, it's quiet, it's got better technology inside the car. It's more roomy because you don't have to have an engine or a transmission hump. It doesn't cost anything to maintain it. I mean, my car, I'm on my second brake fluid change, and that's it. That's all I've had to do in 40,000 miles. I've still got, the brakes will probably last 100,000 miles. So it's just a better technology. It's more, putting aside the fact that it's an environmental necessity. I think we would be changing to EVs purely because they're better vehicles. You don't have 2,000 moving parts like an automobile. So I think the adoption rate is happening. It's got that same feel to it as when we went from cellular phones to smartphones. And it was, if you look at the actual data, it felt like suddenly everybody had a smartphone. But if you actually look at the data, it was fairly slow at first. And then suddenly, people started waking up and realizing, this is what I can do with this thing. I'm going to go buy a smartphone. And now, there are companies, like you think about all those companies that used to be out there, like Ericsson, Motorola, that just, are not relevant anymore because they didn't adapt. And it creates new platforms, right? This whole world is going to change. People that are losers and winners, like any transition. Wouldn't want to be in the oil and gas industry right now. But the utility companies, are going to make a fortune. This is the last time this happened was when air conditioning became prevalent. And the utility companies thought they'd landed on a gold mine then. This is 2 to 3 times more important. So
I believe it. I guess last question is, this has been a great conversation, Paul. You touched on a little bit about workforce development. Obviously, a lot of our listeners are in their 20s. They want to get into electric vehicles and charging. It's a sexy thing for them. They feel it's the future. What kind of advice do you give to anyone? Say you run into a college student and they want to get into your industry. How do they break into it? What do you recommend for them to start their path?
Well, the easy answer to that question is become an engineer. Because whether it's electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, whether it's EV charging or solar or wind or the new technologies we're going to have to develop to deal with climate change, like carbon capture, all need engineers. So if you've got a math background and you like that, become an engineer and you've got a job for life. I would say that there's also I think focusing on the environmental side of and the policy side is important. We need to replace People in my generation need to be replaced with younger people. I mean, my generation screwed this all up, and we continue to ignore it. So run for office, become a policymaker, get people like me out of office and get yourself into office. Because, if we look at, even the infrastructure bill, it just scratches the surface of what we need. And we can't seem to get this Build Back Better bill passed. We absolutely need that. That's a down payment, not a solution. And so we got to get, the old people out and get the new people in, who've got, who ultimately are going to have a stake in all of this, right? I mean, what we do today is going to solve or not, and if we don't solve it, it's not going to be pretty. Now I'm an optimist. I think we as a human species, once things, we get slapped around the face enough times, and realize that this is a real problem, we tend to find solutions. But I think that's going to come from the younger generation. So please run for office, become an engineer, become a policymaker, because we need that talent right now.
It would be nice to have a few more engineers in the office as opposed to
Yes.
nothing but lawyers too. So
Yeah,
great
agreed.
advice.
Now I'm a reformed lawyer, so I but I don't take offense at your comment.
That's all right. I'm a reform banker. I'm with you too. So quickly, what's your website and where can people get more information about JuiceBar?
www.juicebarcharger.com.
Well, Paul, thank you. You gave us a great understanding. You changed our perspective, which I think the amazing part about our conversation with you is a lot of my high school buddies, they always talk about, when it gets to 400 miles range, that's a tank of gas and maybe I'll consider it. But they shouldn't even be thinking that way. So thank you for giving us a new perspective and good luck to JuiceBar in the future.
All right. Well, thank you. And to all your friends, tell them to go out and buy an EV because it's a hell of a fun car to drive. I love driving cars, and I've raced cars in my past, and there is no better. The current car I have, there's no better car I've driven.
Great.
Fantastic.
All right.
Great.
Thank you very much.
And we are back. Lucas, I thought Paul was a great guest. He gave us such a different perspective on how to think about electric vehicle charging and how to get over range anxiety. I thought that was great.
Yeah, it's good to hear somebody from the industry talking to that knows their stuff. And it was interesting too to see his perspective. Like they weren't targeting the level 3 charging network. They were targeting level 2, which is a really good point because it's going to be much more prolific with level 2 chargers everywhere. So that's probably a good market choice on his part.
Oh, I agree. Because, we think about level 3 is always about that terror moment when you're on the highway and you got to, you got to get off because you only got 10% of your battery left. But the reality is that's only going to be 1 or 2 days of your year. So great stuff. So you heard his website. Thank you, Paul. Looking forward to maybe having him on in the future to hear more about his company. So with that, why don't we go right into articles right after I do our fun disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed by Lucas and I are those of ourselves and not any organization we are affiliated with. And any public companies that we mentioned, we are not making any recommendation about the securities to purchase or sell of that company one way or the other. So please consult with a registered investment professional, do your homework, and be safe out there.
Yeah, and I have up right now too, like the JuiceBar website, so you can see what their charger looks like. You can see what it looks like when it's installed. Very interesting. All right. So very cool.
Very cool website. So thank you. Great to see him there. Great to see everyone operating using JuiceBar.
Yep. So, okay. So I'm going to start out. I wanted to have a rebuttal about the exploding Tesla because I wanted to, and it looks like Mr. Rob Strumpf had the same idea I did. This is December 27th, so it's a little older. But this is all the real numbers. If you want to know what the real numbers are, what the costs are, it's all spelled out in this article. I definitely recommend it from the drive. Here's how a model Tesla S holds up after 424,000 miles. Yes, it's still kicking, but not without its fair share of repairs. So they go through all the numbers here. And yes, these cars can last 1,000,000 miles, which is unheard of in ICE terms, internal combustion engine. You never have an engine last more than like 300,000 miles for internal combustion or a car, what have you. So these numbers are astronomical. This guy here has owned his 2015 Tesla Model S for 6 years. He's got 424,000 miles on it, right? So just to be clear, he has had a battery replacement. It was replaced under warranty at about 250,000 miles, meaning now his new battery pack has about 180,000 miles on it, and it has lost about 25% of its range, just to be clear, right? They have another example down here. Let's see. There's one with 401,000 miles from a 2016 Model S, racked up about $29,000 worth of maintenance and repairs. Now that may seem like a lot, but when you divide by 400,000 miles, that's about 7 cents per mile of maintenance. So again, like there's also a record holder here who has 921,000 miles on his EV. He has gone through 2 battery packs and 3 drive units replaced during his 620,000 miles. So just to be clear, yes, they are fantastic. Yes, they have low maintenance costs. No, they don't last forever. Yes, you might have to replace your battery after 250,000 miles. To me, that seems like a great deal. It's way cheaper than replacing your ICE. So these are the real numbers. I didn't want to hide anything from you guys, so I thought this was great to bring up.
You know, it's funny because what would really be good with this article is to take this and compare it to somebody that's had a Honda Accord for 424,000 miles.
Right.
And to look at the maintenance cost, overall cost of ownership, right? Because I think the Honda Accord is one of the gold standard cars. So you can get 400,000 miles out of a Honda Accord without an engine swap. But when you talk about, you know, cost of gasoline, cost of general maintenance and repairs, it still adds up. So what would that turn out to be, you know, 0.7 cents per mile versus on this one here versus, you know, a regular ICE engine? I think that would be an awesome comparison. And in one of my articles, we're going to do a very similar comparison. We'll talk about that.
Yeah. So yeah, like 400,000 miles, that's 100 oil changes. So yeah, you got to think about that too.
Good story. Good story.
I wanted to bring up a big article here too. This one is from Substack by Noah Smith. America's top environmental groups have lost the plot on climate changes from January 14th. So he brings up this interesting conundrum that I've seen around also, which is where some NIMBYism has come into, you could say, environmental groups that are now opposing environmentally friendly clean energy projects. And it seems to be right a conundrum here. Like, why are groups like the Audubon Society suing to block California wind farms, the NRDC supporting closing nuclear power plants, the Sierra Club opposing solar projects? And so there's a couple of reasons here. One, a lot of these groups were started in, say, the 60s and 70s. They were conservation groups, and the enemy at that time was development. So they are anti-development. So they see, you know, bringing in plows and plowing over land and then putting solar panels is a bad thing. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is the Sierra Club's not really a formally organized group, right? Anybody can start a local Sierra Club and get a charter from national and then take pretty much any position they want, right? So there's a little bit of that too. But I think the lesson for me is we still have to be prudent, right? We still have to be prudent in our development of renewable energy. We can't just plow over forests. We can't just destroy land and put up solar farms and say, hey, we're clean and green and all this, right? We do have to think about the trade-offs. We do have to think about the impact on the environment, you know, like hydroelectric dams, right? That destroy ecosystems with the reservoir that they build. So we do have to consider all these things. We have to make sure we're being sustainable when we do these. So really interesting arguments to get you thinking about, you know, where we should be going and how we should be getting there.
Yeah, I thought this piece was really good. You know, first off, we have actually seen projects like offshore wind weaponize, like the anti-offshore wind people would use something like bird migration as a way to weaponize and to stop the project itself. So
Right.
using that is horrible because I don't think they care about the birds. They just care about not developing the wind farm. Secondly, we've also seen the NIMBY issues. Probably the most famous was Cape Cod, and how far delayed and how long delayed, doing offshore wind in a perfect part of the United States was, because people didn't want to see the turbine. Now it's different because people are accepting the need for green energy. So, again, I think it's all about having these conversations up front, bringing stakeholders, to a development project early on, being transparent about it. And once you're transparent about it, getting any feedback that can be positive or negative and acting on it to the best of one's position. My high school government teacher, Mr. Kane, always said, compromise is the essence of politics. And when it comes to these, the firms or organizations blocking development, have the conversation and be prepared to compromise, and let's do what's right. No more delays. We need the green energy. I don't want a bird to get hit by a windmill, but I also want a bird to breathe in fresh air when they're flying.
That's a good point. Yeah, so those are the ones I wanted to bring up, so I can pass the torch over to you, Eric.
Yeah, well, you know what? We have a couple fun ones. Why don't we go to the car and driver one?
All right.
That kind of ties into what you're talking about.
Right.
This was great. The story was perfectly timed with my high school buddies asking over text messages, all that horrible situation with I-95 in Virginia during that snowstorm a few weeks back, people stranded for 16 to 20 hours. And they were asking, what happens if you're stalled out on a highway in an EV? Well, Car and Driver magazine on January 21st, Connor Hoffman had the article, how can an EV keep the cabin warm when it's cold out? They found out. And what they did is, I think they took a Tesla Model 3 and a Hyundai Sonata conventional gasoline engine, put them next to each other, and they found out that a Tesla Model 3 to keep the cabin at 65 degrees barely uses any energy. And I think the battery degraded 2.2% every hour. And so, on a relatively fully charged battery, you can make it well over a day and have enough if the tow truck finally clears the road that you can probably get to a charging station. In the Tesla's case, I think it was about, 50 miles of battery left, and the battery was about 97% charged. But also they had to heat the car. The car was like, they turned it on and had to heat it, so it had to get up to 65 degrees. Whereas sometimes when you're entering a highway, the car is already at 65, 70 degrees. We should say the Sonata also did very well. The Sonata, in its very efficient engine, did well. But however, when you looked at it a kind of apples to apples basis, the Tesla beat the living crap out of the Hyundai's conventional engine burn rate. So I think it was like almost 80, 90% more efficient. So and the Sonata is a very good car. We know certain people that own one. So it was just a really good comparison. Check out the article. Lucas has the statistics up here that kind of give a good comparison, so you can see what their assumptions were. But the fear factor, again, should go away, because on a modern engine, like Paul was saying, on a modern motor and battery system, they're very efficient, long range. You're going to be able to survive being stuck on a highway in an EV in comfort.
Yeah, I mean, this shouldn't be surprising to people. I guess it's kind of the story that is shocking, that it's surprising to people. Yes, your battery in your EV stores energy that you can use to keep your car warm when you're stuck in a traffic jam. Yeah. So yeah, I guess we shouldn't have been shocked that this was going to come out this way. Yep.
So good story. Let's go to my carbon rules. Yeah, that one. This one is from tradewindsnews.com, which is a shipping publication. This one's there's a lot to digest here, but it comes down to this. Article is from January 13th by Eric Permente Martin. Title is How 2023's Carbon Rules Could Be a Game Changer, quote unquote, for Shipping Contracts. What's happening is the IMO and EU have new regulations that are going to hold accountable ships in terms of how much carbon usage they are engaged with. And it's going to have some accountability standards. And everyone is going to have and kind of be compliant with this energy efficiency existing ship index and this carbon intensity indicator that are going to be benchmarks that are going to monitor global shipping. So what this is first off, the EU is actually going to subject companies to, or shippers to, an emission trading system from the 1st of January. So shippers are going to have to be very cognizant, and they're going to have to trade off for credits if they have old, inefficient carbon, belching ships out there. And it's going to just probably move everyone a little bit slower, a little bit faster to adopting cleaner technology out there in the shipping and maritime industry. This one talks a little bit about policy, about where they need to go. But I thought this was a good article just for the fact that these types of standards are being introduced, because we don't talk about how much carbon that maritime industry puts out, but it is significant. So really good story. I recommend checking it out.
Yeah, this is great because so many people just burn carbon without thinking about it. And it's going to take something like this to kind of wake people up, right? And say, no, you're burning carbon and dumping it in the atmosphere. And so there has to be accountability there. So hopefully this will serve that function. So I look forward to seeing how the industry reacts.
Yeah, I thought maybe we can even have one or two of the people in this article as a guest one day, because they really bring up some interesting stuff. But anyways, we haven't talked about shipping in a while. I think this is a good one. So last article.
All right.
Last article, Euronews.com. I know they say Euronews.green on the header, but it's Euronews.com under their Eco Innovation segment. A new biomass mapping tool can pinpoint the carbon of a single 30-meter tree. So I really like this story because we've talked ad nauseum about how we're entering this green revolution. We have limited resources, so we need to be diligent, and we have to be, finding the right opportunities, the right areas to invest in. This is actually saying that there's new technology out there that can map the world's carbon stores and find out where carbon is actually being stored, and actually to end some misperception about where carbon is not being stored. One of the interesting things in this article is that over the last couple of years, the Amazon rainforest is a net emitter of carbon, not a net absorber. We always say the Amazon is kind of the lungs of the globe, but that's actually not been the case given all the activity taking place in and around the Amazon rainforest. And so that's a little bit frightening. When another article they brought up is that 6 years of the EU's existing vegetation can absorb the equivalent of 1 year of their economic output in the territory. So, this is a really cool about technology, about mapping, and it just could give us the ability to find out where the hotspots are, where we need to be improving, and where we can put in better carbon sequestration policy as a country and technology, both as a country basis and globally. So really recommend this article. It's a lot of fun. It's a little bit out of the box, but again, we're just trying to find the way to be as efficient as possible as we enter this green revolution.
Yeah, this is great. I think I have looked into this recently also, that the global, even natural carbon sinks and carbon sources are massive, right? And this system is complex. So the more we understand this and the more data we have on this, the better. So this is great to see. I'd like to see more along these lines. I'd like to see more literal accountability. I mean, accounting, not so much accountability as in, putting it on people, but literally accounting for carbon, having a global carbon account that everybody knows and can see and is well known. The atmospheric ppm is kind of doing that right now, but yeah, a little more detail would help us and understand how complex this system is, and how, maybe we don't need as much drastic action as we might think if we can understand this system better and utilize it better. So very interesting to see. Look at this. They even say China's carbon sink growth is due in part to an aggressive tree planting policy. That's amazing. So you see a lot of green here.
Yeah,
very interesting article.
Yeah, and China, they've actually been trying to reforest parts of the Gobi Desert, the eastern part, to prevent sand pollution from in the skies. And I think that's what you see in the northern part of that map there. So wow. It's great. I mean, this type of mapping technology, the technology is out there, and now it's being utilized in a very smart, efficient way. So good article.
Yeah,
we had some really cool stuff. We focused a lot on EVs today, so and EV charging, but I think it was worth having that conversation. Great guest with Paul. And Lucas, tell us a little bit more about where we could find out more about the Pirates of Clean Tech.
Yes, you can find us on youtube.com. You just search for Pirates of Clean Tech. You hit subscribe and you hit the little alarm bell if you want to notification for when our videos drop. That way you can follow along with us in the articles. But if you're a busy person, like most people are, you probably want us on your podcast when you're commuting. You can go to your favorite podcast site. We're on about a dozen podcast sites. Just search for Pirates of Clean Tech, click subscribe or listen, and then you can listen in while you drive or do your laundry or what have you. So
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned laundry because everyone I talk to says they listen to us while either doing laundry or washing the dishes. So I don't know, maybe clean tech has something to do with cleaning and psychologically.
it's just clean people love talking about clean tech. I don't know.
They just want to get cleaner and cleaner with that high efficient washing machine that they have. But really good episode. And want to thank our listeners again. We have a couple other guests we've teed up for the next couple of weeks, and we're going to have a great time. So with that, I'm Eric Planey.
I am Lucas Finko.
And together we are the Pirates of Clean Tech. Yar!
Yar har har.
Yar!
Yar.